future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, how you doing? It is Wednesday, July 28th, 2021. I'm Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken, and welcome to the newest edition of Raging Chicken's collection of podcasts. Yes, it's the Wednesday show with Cyril Mychalejko, progressive columnist for the Bucks County Courier Times and the Intelligencer. This show joins Out to Coop Live, our Monday interview show, and our Friday politics roundup, in which Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And while you're at it, since you're signing up for stuff, you might as well sign up for Cyril's newsletter on Substack. That's cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. That's cyrilmychalejko.substack.com. Definitely got to check out all his work over there. I love the new feature, by the way, the 5 articles you need to read this week, or today. It was an excellent little addition, got to say. You can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month at patreon.com/rcpress. And your support has helped make today's show possible. You can also help out the show by heading on over to our YouTube channel and smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you'll know every time we go live. You can also join our Discord server to continue the conversation all week long. It's a little slow now that it's summer and lots of people are on vacation. Just going to warn you ahead of time, just let you know, but that'll pick up real soon again. And just click on the link in today's show notes to join the Discord. Special shout out also goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayMan. That's @SongADayMan with 2 N's on Twitter. Well, on this week's show, we'll be talking about Cyril's freshly minted column. We didn't think it was going to be out until tomorrow, but here it is. The column's called Join the Civil Rights Movement of 2021 and Beyond. That was published today in the Bucks County Courier Times. Cyril had the opportunity to talk to Kadida Kenner of the New Pennsylvania Project about the critical need to protect and extend voting rights in PA at a moment when echoes of Jim Crow are heard in our media, school board meetings, and legislative sessions. Right across the board. How happy does that make me? I also hope to get his take on a decision by the Central Bucks School Board not to require a mask for the upcoming school year, despite the new guidance from the CDC. And that decision came down like an hour after the new CDC recommendations were released. And if we have time, we might even dip into Kathy Barnett's bid for the Republican nomination for the PA Senate. That is intriguing me right now, I got to say, at the very least. So welcome once again to the show. Cyril, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Good to be back.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, if you need a little energy, I'm going to give a little shout out to the folks over at Blooming Glen Farm. It's a CSA right here, right outside Percy, and I have been munching on these cherry tomatoes like they're candy, let me tell you. So now I'm chewing on one like an idiot. So here we go. So Cyril, this week you've got your new column that's out. Just came out. Like I said, it surprised us. You got a chance to talk to Kadida Kenner. So tell us a little about kind of what your approach in the column, and walk us through it.
Sure. And just a shout out to you, because kind of I learned more about Kadida by listening to one of your other podcasts when you had her on as a guest. And
well, there you have it.
She was great, and I knew at some point that I definitely needed to talk to her. And for me, like, one of my approaches with the column is to kind of like use it as an organizing tool, right? And to kind of, like I said, in my first column, just to kind of like build up the progressive community and the progressive infrastructure. And Kadida, with her New Pennsylvania Project, I mean, that's what she's, doing, but not just in Bucks County, but across the state.
Absolutely.
So, I wanted to help introduce her. I know a lot of folks already knew about her, but to those that didn't, just introduce Kadida and the work that she's doing, because as you and I both know, and everyone else, we find ourselves at a critical moment right now where Republicans want to kind of roll back the clock to the 1950s with regards to kind of voting rights, political and social order, etc. And we're seeing, demagogues like, Doug Mastriano, State Senator Mastriano, kind of using the big lie, right, that Trump kind of spread, which caused the insurrection, which Mastriano was at as it was happening, was just outside of the Capitol building, kind of watching it in real time. I believe did he organize buses there as well?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
So you have Mastriano trying to kind of, organize this fraud, this sham audit of votes in Pennsylvania because, insanely, he still believes Donald Trump should have won the election. And then now other Republican legislators are kind of like using this big lie and this audit as a pretext to kind of push through more voting restrictions like voter ID laws.
Well, this is what we saw a big uptick on right now, right? We see the Republicans were going through with the playbook. Governor Wolf, of course, decides to we talked a little bit about this last week, but Governor Wolf said, hey, I'm not so much opposed to voter ID if they're done the right way. And then we see Republicans say, okay, good to know, because now we're going to bring it back, right? They see this as kind of like a cultural wedge issue. And any way that they can push down the vote, right, push down the vote of people that could potentially vote kind of Democratic, they're going to do. Right? And they really don't care, I think, about the truth value of claims about whether Trump won the election or not. That half the time I think that they just recognize that this is enough red meat to get people frothing at the mouths in order to drive them to the polls, in order to try to maintain their power, especially as we're kind of going into a Senate election that's going to be really significant in 2022.
No, absolutely. I mean, do you think Mastriano is a true believer, or do you think he's just cynical and just kind of like using this as as an issue? Do you think?
But I think he's a true believer, right? But there's a little asterisk next to that, right? Because I think that once he decided that he believed, he just kind of cut the line to tethering himself to the planet Earth. So it doesn't matter anymore. He's got his belief and he's going with it. So once he's inside that bubble, that's it. But the thing is, I will say about Mastriano, while I think people like PA Spotlight and everyone have been following him so closely, has everything to do with, I think he's a much more calculating politician than was, say, for example, Scott Wagner, who ran the kind of the right-wing white supremacist campaign last time around. So
yeah, which makes him more dangerous.
Right, exactly.
And then we were also, you had mentioned this to me last week when I was kind of, talking to you about what I was thinking about writing. Like one thing we know is like these voter ID restrictions that disproportionately impact people of color, poor and working class, and young students who tend to vote Democratic. That it's because they tend to vote Democratic that they're doing this. And,
exactly.
And I don't know if we can play the clip, but, there's a former PA House Speaker, Mike Turzai, who admitted as much at a state committee meeting.
Here it is. Let's do it right here. Wait, where'd he go? Wait. Oh, got to put the volume up again here. Let me hold on just a second. We got Turzai right here. This is from when Romney was running against Obama. Right, so this is, and that would put it in what?
2012.
2012. All right, here's Mike Turzai, former head of the Pennsylvania House.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
As
there it is.
Clap. Yeah, so
saying the quiet part out loud.
Yes, thank you for your honesty and your candor, Mike Turzai. So the Republicans actually passed, voter ID restrictions back then. But thankfully the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned it as, because it recognized that it was just voter suppression. There was no need for it because this whole idea of like voter fraud is just a myth. And then they recognized that it put undue burdens on voters, right? So like, if we want like a multiracial and effective democracy, we need to make it easier for people to vote, because that doesn't encourage fraud, it just encourages people to vote.
Exactly. So, here, I mean, I think that that's going to be the burning issue, kind of our time moving forward. And I thought that, in your column, you kind of, I don't want to jump to the end first, but I mean, one of the things that you do say is like, quoting Kadida Kenner in there, saying, everything spurs from voting rights, civil rights, voting rights, economic justice, voting rights, educational justice, voting rights. Nothing that we hope for, right, that we can do collectively as a people, can happen in the absence of our access to, that foundational right of any democracy, which is voting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's why it's so important that people kind of get involved. I would encourage people to go to the New Pennsylvania Project and volunteer, and because they want people to work in their own communities. They're not like parachuting like activists in from the outside, right? They want to build this from the ground up, and it's not just about today. This is kind of going to be like an ongoing battle, an ongoing struggle. We know that the Republicans are this is their playbook. They did it in 2010. They did it with the Jim Crow laws, right? So it's just, history in this country just is in constant, on a constant repeat cycle. And so we need to kind of be organized and ready to kind of resist and protect our democracy. Because, one of the other things I was talking about is, this is just part of what's been dubbed as a white lash, right?
Right.
So, and Kadida mentioned this as well. She said, this is a power grab, pure and simple, because one, folks were unhappy with the way the election turned out, and two, they're even more unhappy with the changing demographics, which voted in a way to, unseat President Trump. And in addition, we're seeing the conservative white Christians, which was, back in the 90s, the quote unquote moral majority or a majority in the country, their numbers are just plummeting, right? So I think it was 65% back in 94, now it's at 44%. And a lot of that has to do with, they're kind of antiquated, archaic ideas about race, sexuality, and they're kind of anti-science agenda when it comes to climate change. Thankfully, younger folks, are a little more tuned in. So this population's graying, they're shrinking, but they're becoming more desperate because they feel like they're entitled to rule this country.
Yep.
Right, and so they'll do anything, even if it's voter suppression, even if it's anti-democratic, in order to hold on or seize power.
Well, look, I mean, I'm not trying to equate these periods in history in a 1-to-1 ratio here, but essentially this is the same dynamics which we've seen at each stage of major changes in who gets to participate in this democracy. Right, at the end of slavery, right after the Civil War, right, we had a period of Reconstruction, which we had this really small glimpse into what a truly multiracial democracy would look like, and that was a democracy for all the people. Again, I'm not saying it was this kind of perfect moment in history, but it was a glimpse, like I was saying. And it seems like any time that there's an advancement, right, in the kind of democratization of our culture, democratization of our society, and access to, what democracy is, right? Ruled by the people, by all the people, not just an elite few, right? That any time that there's a move in that direction, there's, to use the word that you kind of referred to earlier, there's a white lash, right? And, I made this slip on the show on Monday night, but it got me thinking. It's we start using this because as the Republican Party has moved further and further to the white, right, and has become increasingly a white identity party, that any attempt to basically expand the franchise of democracy necessarily means a threat to that kind of white supremacy framework. And so I think that right now, as we all know that there's demographically, this country very soon is going to be, white people are no longer going to be a racial majority in this country, right? That doesn't mean that suddenly there's a flip and then all black people are going to be the majority, right? It's not how it works, but it means that we become a multiracial democracy just in terms of the people here. And so the real question on our table right now is, do our laws, do our schools, right, do our culture, right, lead us in that direction where we are going to make good on the promise of democracy, right? I mean, and I think that the work that Kadida is doing, right, and the work that so many people are doing to kind of focus on voting rights is that remembering that without that foundational right to vote, all the rest of the stuff falls away. Right?
No, I mean, absolutely. And this just kind of, it's no coincidence that the same people that are trying to, dismantle our democracy and block access to the ballot are the ones who are trying to whitewash history, right, in our schools with the
exactly
race theory stuff.
Exactly. And, as folks, the shout outs were great on Twitter about folks on critical race theory. Just so everybody knows, too, I'm going to clip out a section of Monday night's show when I was talking about critical race theory, put that up as a separate video since people seem to kind of dig that, which is good. So I'll put it out there. But, it's also a lot of these same people, of course, that are moving the critical race theory, that are attempting to roll back voting rights, are also ones that are trying to roll back science, right? They're trying to roll back, this right here. And we're seeing this bubble up again as the COVID, the Delta variant of COVID is now spreading more rapidly. You saw once again the CDC kind of change its recommendations in terms of masking. And at that same, basically saying that going forward, assuming that this Delta variant continues to burn through the kindling of all the unvaccinated, right? And now we're starting to find out there's more and more breakthrough infections, and that kids who are unvaccinated are now getting sick. Within an hour of that coming down, we saw this fight happening over in the Central Bucks School Board, right? Where the school board say, yeah, we heard what the CDC said, but nope, we're not going to do this. We're not going to require a mask going forward. And there were a lot of concerned parents out there, and there were a lot of same of the suspects like, no, you're taking away my freedom. My kid can't breathe, which is pretty disgusting. So I'm just curious your take on what went down both in that press conference that took place and what was happening in the Central Bucks school board meeting.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the people that organized the press conference did a great job.
I agree.
Because like one of the things they just wanted to do is just raise awareness about, science, right? Like what science professionals are recommending, before the CDC came out, there was also the American Academy of Pediatrics that kind of, set forth like similar guidelines about how to keep your kids safe, right? Which you wouldn't think would be a controversial act, but and it's all, it should be made clear that folks want kids in person school. Like they want them to go to school. Like this is the whole thing. They want them to be in school. The people that organized the press conference, they want the kids in school. They just want them to be safe, right? And they want to make sure that the community is safe because we're not through this pandemic yet.
Right.
We've made a lot of progress. Especially with vaccinations, that have been, in Pennsylvania has done, I think, a pretty good job. But like another thing that just really struck me about this whole thing was just, again, this backlash, from the, anti-science, anti-expert, just anti-common sense, right in the community. They were nasty. I mean, they were toxic. There's video of them. There's one woman cursing at one of the students who was speaking at the press conference, right? It's just like, it's one thing if you have like a difference of opinion. Just show a little class and a little decorum, right? A little self-control, right? Like you're supposed to be setting a model, for kids and students here, and you can't even control your temper. Again, this is a symptom of like what we've seen, like Fox News, the One America News Network. What's the other like far right propaganda outlet?
Newsmax.
Newsmax. Yeah, they're kind of like whipping these people up into like a frenzy, right? Like and so you're going to see violent outbursts like this. I mean, one woman like physically tried to grab a mic from Kevin Levin, who was holding a mic for one of the doctors who was speaking, right? So, like, right now we have them, like, angry and just, like, in this frenzy, and they're, like, cursing at children. They can't even control themselves. It's not a big step towards, like, physical violence, right? Like, you're right there at the threshold of that with how these people are kind of, like, in this, like, just hysterical, emotional state.
Totally. Let me read. This is from the Philly Tribune, right? It goes right to the example that you just used about Kevin Levin. So so people get a really clear sense of what was happening there if you haven't seen the footage already. So this is from the Philly Tribune. One crowd member, a white woman, swiped at Kevin Levin, who was black, while he was holding a microphone for one of the pediatricians speaking, Dr. Anushka Vishnawathan. I think I got close. And as she spoke, the woman yelled, "Murderer!" Right? So, I mean, just think about that. And then I said others in the audience yelled, "Lies, child abuse, and my kids can't breathe," as speakers highlighted recommendations for the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as the American Academy of Pediatrics. But we are here to say that every student deserves the opportunity to learn in person, said Dr. Mariam Mahmood, a pediatric physician at Bucks County resident with 4 children in the district, who helped organize the press conference. And she's also running for school board member in November. They trust the pediatric guidance provided during this pandemic. Right? So there you have it. You have people attempting to say, look, we all want our kids back in school. Let's just make sure that they're safe. And you contrast that with say, let's look at the science and what the recommendations are. Let's move forward cautious to make sure that our kids' education is not going to be disrupted and that everybody is safe. And on the other side of that, in that press conference, people yelling "murderer." I mean, it's like, it's such a disconnected kind of world there, because look, there could be disagreements over like how you actually handle and what safety means and all that stuff, and there could be a kind of legitimate sets of disagreements and concerns there. I totally get that, but this is so far like beyond that it is on the edge of violence, exactly as you said. And what would it take if somebody, could you just imagine in that situation if one of the speakers, right, or one of the people who was helping order the press conference accidentally tripped and ran into one of these people yelling "murderer"?
Jeez.
I mean, you could see that's how like much of a tinderbox it seems like in these school board meetings.
Yeah, and just like we were talking about this earlier, the whole thing with the "My Children Can't Breathe," which is just a riff off of, I believe it was Eric Garner, being choked out by a police officer and being murdered, trying to equate a kid wearing a mask at school to protect his classmates and teachers to the police murder of an unarmed black man is just, it's racist and it's just disgusting. And you see that all over the place. You see these people. And so like, do you think that they're doing this on purpose? Like they know they're being racist and they just want to kind of like, try to stir people up, especially like a lot of the speakers were people of color as well, which should be known.
I totally think that's true. I totally think that, and again, I don't mean to suggest that, and I don't think this is how this all works, right? I don't think it's like they sit down and say, "Hey, let's take this saying and let's do this, and we're going to do blah blah blah." It's not that. It's not kind of that rational kind of response. But I do think they get immense satisfaction out of kind of exercising their white grievance, right? By basically flipping the phrase that is being used for Black Lives Matter, right? And then flip it and turning on its head. And the example I used on my Monday night show is there's this family down the street from me, basically in Percy, that had these big billboards out, right? And they're kind of all anti-DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. And they're critical race theory people and all this kind of stuff. And so you can see what's happening there. But they also have, next to that, they have a quote from Frederick Douglass, right? As a way of kind of saying, ha! Look, a black guy said this, right? I mean, it's the same kind of thing. It's like wanting to because look, at some level, right, there's horrors attached to white supremacy.
Yeah.
Right? And people don't like being confronted with any of those things. And even if, this is what that book, like Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, this is a perfect example of this, where when they see any kind of aspect of their privilege being kind of questioned, right? And that's as simple as having a brown woman speak at a microphone, right, about like keeping our kids safe. They get, I think, a visceral satisfaction about throwing this back in their face, right, and owning the libs. And that's really, I mean, it's a sad comment like on the state of our culture right now.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that folks take these school board elections super seriously, right? There's so many things that we have to organize around. It's amazing, but we got to at least try to find a time, or at least if you have a couple extra bucks to kind of donate to these school board candidates, whether it's in the Central Bucks School District, who have a great slate of candidates, or the candidates in your school district,
Penridge, right?
Penridge, right? Who are facing off with against a slot of just like far right, just bigoted QAnon following, like Newsmax Kool-Aid drinkers. A few bucks makes a huge difference, right? For a school board race, or just like spending an afternoon to knock on some doors to help out. That makes a huge difference, and this is what we're up against, and we need to kind of come together to kind of like confront this white rage and this just like unhinged anger that we're facing from the other side, because it's going to have ramifications for years to come if these folks are allowed to kind of seize power of different institutions, especially with our schools, where they're kind of setting not only like public safety and public health guidelines, but also curriculum.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, as finding the time feels like so many different fronts by which to fight. I get that. But the good news of that is, in some ways it's right in our communities right now, right? It's not this thing that is happening way out there. I mean, so like making sure my kids are safe is the same thing as making sure that these people, who are QAnon adherents are not getting elected to my school board, right? Is the same thing as, making sure that when they go to school, they're not going to be coming home with a Delta variant, right? Is the same thing as kind of choosing community and inclusive community over kind of white supremacy. I mean, it's all happening right at the local level now. I don't want to say especially in Bucks County, but it feels like Bucks County is one of these hotbeds, right, in the PA first district. I wanted to we'll touch briefly upon. I'll say this. One, I'm going to have some of the folks from these school districts now. We're going to start bringing them out to Coop Live too as well. I know that I got a message from one of the candidates saying like, hey, Cyril said maybe maybe a good idea to contact you. I'm like, funny you should say this. I just put out a message to like this other Facebook group that was saying, hey, why don't you come on? So we're going to have some folks on from the Penridge School Board. We're going to have folks. We're going to reach out to folks Central Bucks, reach out to folks up in Palisades, and kind of increasingly. And again, I understand if there's folks out there that are like, oh, we're going to hear about school boards once again, but I can't tell you, this is really where the rubber hits the road. What is happening in the organizing around school boards right now, in my humble opinion, has everything to do right up the election ladder, right? Is that the more that these races get heated up, that is going to drive turnout, which is going to have an impact on the Pennsylvania Senate race. So if you want to organize, we need to organize around school boards. We need to be talking about what's happening here, because it's directly linked up what's happening in the gubernatorial race and it's happening in the PA Senate race. So, and
not to mention the dark money that's being spread from the school board
100%.
races to the state and federal races. It's all the same dirty money, and that's what we're competing against.
Exactly. Well, we'll probably have time to kind of go in this and follow us a little bit more, but I want to put this on people's radar and kind of get your quick take on this. There was an article that was published in the Inquirer this week, and it just kind of, I don't know, I've been going down, I don't want to say kind of a hole on this one, because that doesn't quite do it right. Here, let me just bring it up real quick. There we go. So Kathy Barnett, she is running for Pennsylvania Senate, right? She's an African American conservative, right? Who is a stop the steal kind of Trumper, and it's came out. This took me by surprise. I mean, maybe people who are following the electoral stuff a little bit closely, it did not, but she basically raised the most money of any of the Republican senatorial candidates kind of out there right now, and that took a lot of folks back. And she's launched it. We should have her on your radar, right? Because I think this is showing. Because again, this is like an own libs. What's the best way that you can kind of own the libs is by having a black woman kind of be a pro-Trumper to throw it in your face, right? I mean, to resist. This is how they deal with kind of racist claims. But I'm curious, kind of any initial takes you got about her candidacy or what's happening at that with that.
Sure. I mean, one, I think it speaks volumes that she's part of this like whole big lie, stop the steal crusade. She was in January 6th as well, which shouldn't come as a surprise. And then it just shows you that the Republican Party has completely changed, right? Like, it's never a great party, don't get me wrong. But it's now like Trump's party, right? And so it's a party of like anti-intellectualism. It's a party of conspiracy theories. It's a party of lies and anti-small d democratic politics, right? Barnett is just the latest kind of like version of that, and she got blown out in the last race. Maybe she might do better statewide, given the Democrat, the kind of the politics of the state. I guess we can't make the same mistake that I think people made with Trump and just kind of like underestimate her. But it's definitely something to, like you said, it's something to keep on your radar and watch. Especially I think it is pretty shocking that she did raise the most money, given her performance in the last election. So maybe the powers that be like see her as just kind of like that's the brand that we're going for. This pro-Trump, big lie, Politico. That's something that I'll definitely be keeping on my radar, and maybe I'll write about. In the couple.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, and I think that again, that was a Montgomery County race, and she's running against Madeline Dean, who's pretty popular in her district. And you're a county that has kind of gone bluer and bluer as the years go on. So I think that's definitely a good point you're making. Is maybe she's can do better statewide. I said this to you, Cyril, before the show, but her whole campaign is really set up like a classic right-wing grift, right? Given the fact that that's the way Trump's presidential campaign was set up. Right, like he didn't care. I mean, he was not in it to win the presidency. Right at that point, he just saw dollar signs everywhere. And there's a similar kind of vibe that's going on with Barnett's campaign. So we're going to keep an eye on that too as well. Sean and I will get into this. I'm going to do a little bit more deep dive on Friday too as well.
It's almost like a franchise model, right?
It's exactly right. I mean, I had that exact phrase going through my mind, like when I was like reading that. It's like, I can see how this is set up. Yep, that's true. But God, so much to talk about, so much to do, but we're going to have to leave it there for this week. Cyril, what you working on, man? You got any ideas of where you going from here?
Sure. There's a couple things that I have on my to-do list with regards to writing. So, like, one is it's the 40th anniversary of NISQUA, a network of people in solidarity with Guatemala. So this was an organization, a solidarity organization that began in 1980, and the 40th anniversary is coming up. I've met a lot of folks from Nisqually in my travels to Guatemala and in my writing as well. And what they do is they do like a lot of like human rights accompaniment with communities or community leaders that are being threatened. You know, for example, say like a community's embroiled in a conflict with like a U.S. Canadian mining company. Well, oftentimes these mining companies like hire paramilitaries to get rid of the opposition.
Exactly.
We also do a lot of work around helping communities with like transitional justice, you know, post the country's 36-year civil war, which ended in '96 with the peace accords, you know, but they're still trying to bring people to justice for the genocide and the human rights atrocities that that came with that. So, you know, I thankfully I'm meeting up with a local activist who was actually part of Nisqually. So we're going to interview him, talk to him for a potential column. I also, you know, want to talk about some labor issues. So I'll be reaching out to a friend of this show who has his own show, The Rick Smith Show. And if you don't listen to that, you have to. I'm hooked on it now. So I want to talk to him just to kind of about, you know, his take on some of the labor issues that the country's kind of facing, and you know, that we kind of, some of the labor reforms like the PRO Act that we really need to pass, and just kind of like talk about his show in general, just kind of being like grassroots labor media activist. So those are a few things that are on the grill right now, so to speak.
Excellent. I'm very psyched because, as I've said 1,001 times, is that, you know, Rick was really my entry into PA politics. When I first moved here, you know, it's like, thank God I found Rick early on. And, you know, at that point, you know, he had doing his shows for a few years at that point, and had, you know, he has a national focus, an international focus, but also kind of lots of PA focus, and he was even more of a PA focus back then. And I felt like I was able to hit the ground running by listening to his show, kind of understanding the kind of lay of the land, especially when it comes to kind of workers' rights, when it comes to what was happening in terms of the legislature and so on. And, you know, congratulations once again goes out to Rick for just landing a new Saturday show on WBAI in New York. Nice. From 68, in addition to his show on Saturdays at Free Speech TV and his daily podcast, which you can check it all out. Go to ricksmithshow.com. Got to give him a plug anytime I can. That's for sure. Well, that sounds great. So next week I'm going to be gone, and so we'll have we're going to leave you with a surprise about what next week's show we're going to do. Ideally, Cyril will be here for another solo, but we'll kind of we're still waiting for the pieces to get it in there. So if not, we might just ghost you. Who knows? That's the way it goes. But Cyril, man, I appreciate the time. Once again, it's great talking to you. And I want to make sure everybody goes over to cyrilmychalejko.substack.com to sign up for Cyril's newsletter. Please do that. And one of the things that I'm always going to remind you is that you can help support this show by going over to patreon.com/rcpress. Special shout out to Emily this week for becoming a patron. And you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. See ya!